Hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glen Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by investor, speaker, and future of work thought leader, Larry English. How are you doing, Larry?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Great to have you on the show. So please, could you just begin by giving a little bit of a background for the viewers and listeners about how you got into the whole thing around the platform economy and the future of work and what you're doing at the moment?
Absolutely. So I'm president and co-founder of Centric Consulting, and we're about 1,100 people in the US and India. And we do everything from business strategy to lots of technology. And so technology runs the gamut of everything from machine learning to AI to data and analytics. But the most important thing to note is that we've been a remote company for 20 years. And I was in the process of writing a book of how to do that, how we were able to do that and maintain a great culture. And I was getting ready to publish it when the pandemic happened. And so then all of a sudden, everybody was very interested in how you were able to do this. And so I've been writing and speaking on the topic. And then the other thing that because we are a consulting organization, we have everything under one roof. We've been on the front lines helping a lot of companies adopt remote work because it's just, you can't just install Zoom. That's 1% of what you have to do to really be great at remote work. And so we're doing a lot of that and we're seeing what's working and not working. And then I do a decent amount of angel investing. So kind of have a frontline view as well of what the latest trends and what companies are going after and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks for that introduction there. And what would you say is the evolution at the moment? What are the current trends that we're seeing and we should be looking out for as well?
Okay, we could talk all day, but I'll try and keep it focused on really the gig workforce and remote work. So the first one is hybrid is going to win. There's a few people that are still thinking that it's not, we're going to go back to the way things were, and that is not. There was Microsoft published a great white paper last week called the next great work disruption. And so we are in the middle of it. And you even saw some of the most conservative companies in the last few weeks announce that they're going to adopt it. So Chase Bank here in the US, which is a global company, which their CEO has been a vocal opponent of it, said, no, we're going to hybrid. You had Ford Motor Company, which is a 100-year-old company. So the train has left the station. So if you are sitting on the sidelines, you should get into it. The other thing that's happening, certainly here in the US, is everybody's getting their vaccination and companies are starting to say, okay, July 1st, we are going to all come back into the office in some form. Yeah. And what we've been trying to help companies to do is to say, there is a lot you have to figure out if you're going to be great at hybrid, and you're going to have to be great at hybrid. So let's work through all of those things, everything from the policies of, what if I hire somebody that is working in Africa? Do I pay them the same as I pay them in the US? There's all kinds of things that have to be figured out. How do you include those workers? The other big trend is what it's allowed. The gig and freelance momentum or the movement around that was starting to take off prior to the pandemic. But what this has allowed is kind of supercharged it, because all of a sudden companies are very much okay with having freelance workers be a part of their workforce. And the other thing that's interesting is they're reducing their office space. So they don't have enough space for everybody anyway. Yeah. And then employees that got a taste of it, they're like, I love this lifestyle. I want to strike out on my own. And so you're seeing this huge movement of people becoming gig workers and all the tools and platforms that go around that.
Excellent. And I think this is the mindset shift that you're talking about there as well, Larry, the fact that, the technology is there, but people need to be able to embrace it and accept it. But at the same time, there is the element that, it's not just a case of switching on Zoom, as you say yourself. There's a whole number of steps that need to be brought into play. It's the regulation, it's the compliance, it's the do's and don'ts. And I think it's not just an HR issue, it's from all elements of the organization need to be aware of this and need to be able to adapt at the same time.
Right on. And we didn't even touch on some of the government and policy has to catch up to this. And so there are taxes are more complex. if you don't have everybody driving into the city anymore, it's having implications on a reduction in workforce. How do you reconfigure your cities? How do you handle the tax implications, the tax sharing with suburbs?
Mm.
So there is a massive amount of change that's about to happen.
Mm. And would you say we're ready for it? I mean, looking at sort of from a US perspective, and of course we're a little bit further behind here in Europe. But would you say that the rules, labor force regulation is ready for this? Are we tuned in, or is there a lot of adaptation and evolution that needs to take place as well, Larry?
So technology is moving, and it's even accelerated. It's moving at the fastest pace it's ever moved at. And as you know, the government tends to move slower.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely moving slower. And you're seeing like the lawsuits in California around Uber drivers and gig
Yes.
workers.
Yeah.
So you're going to see this. It's still early days. You're going to see a lot of what's the right word? It's going to be messy
Mm.
for
Yeah.
a while as everybody figures it out. But the benefits that come with it and why we are doing it are all there. So we'll
Mm.
figure it out. It's going to get figured out, but it'll be messy as we figure out how to do it.
Mm. And do you think from the regulators, the decision makers' perspective, they're sufficiently tuned in? Are they collaborating? Are they reaching out to co-create this future, or are they kind of going away to the darkened rooms and trying to figure this out by themselves?
I I think it depends on where you're at.
Yeah.
So I'm in Columbus, Ohio, which has an amazing um, the government works hand in hand with business and
Mm.
university because they realize the benefit of doing that. And so it's a great environment. The people they're asking great questions and say, how do we attract more remote workers to cities? So it's really fascinating. If you look at commercial real estate, because what the most companies are doing is they're planning on reducing their real estate footprint by at least 50%.
Right.
And so the only reason there hasn't been a big decimation of the commercial real estate business is because people tend to sign 7 or 8 year
Yeah.
contracts.
Yeah.
But it has huge implications for cities, and cities are trying to figure this out right now. Because if I can live anywhere, what we're seeing is like if you have middle aged and you have a family, you're going to want to move maybe more to the suburbs for a different kind of lifestyle.
Mm.
But young people, what we're seeing is they are missing out when they're joining out of college, as an example. They're missing that social connection.
Yeah.
And so they're
Yeah.
going to move into cities to want to be close to other gig workers.
Mm.
And there's talk of even the city replacing some of the office functions to make up for all of those things that you're missing by working as a remote worker. So I don't think I do think you'll remake cities. I think
Yeah.
the office footprint's going to be smaller. You're not going to have all those people commuting in now.
Mm.
But I think this is just speaking to the US, but I think it's going to lead to a big change, but a more vibrant, it'll be better afterwards.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's creating and maintaining those human contacts. If it's not going to an office to do your 9 till 6, it's another way to sort of co-create, to be able to share ideas with like-minded individuals, gig workers, entrepreneurs, and hopefully this cross-fertilization of good ideas. And cities will still have a role in doing that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
Okay.
more. So being remote for 20 years, that's one of the things we learned is even if you're remote, people still, you crave human connection.
Yeah.
And so you have to build those into whatever your design is for remote,
Yeah.
because getting together in person reinforces those relationships that you've made virtually,
Mm.
and it energizes people. And it also helps in some cases around innovation. I do think you can innovate with a virtual workforce, but there are certain cases where what does help to be in person. So we are an advocate, and we recommend any remote workforce has what I call the kind of their gathering strategy of when are you getting together face to face.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's great to realize that cities are not dying out. Human contact is not going to die out because of technology. This is, the opposite, if not, is basically the trend that we're seeing here, Larry.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, that's very interesting. And moving on with your sort of angel investor hat on now, what are the areas that are really hot right now in terms of investment linked to this kind of, is it a revolution or is it evolution? I'm not too sure. It could be, you could argue for both. But given that, what are kind of the developments that we're seeing, and the areas that are hot at the moment that we are looking at from an investment and a lot of push behind?
So I'll take it into a couple of different categories. What I would say, so there has never been more creation of that I've ever seen, and the money that is available, I've never seen this much as well. So
Okay.
you're seeing this massive startup ecosystem that's going on, and it's moved away from Silicon Valley as well because of remote. And so you're seeing they realized it used to be you had to move to Silicon Valley if you
Mm,
wanted to be a unicorn. Not true anymore. And so it's moving, at least, I look at the US, it's moving across the US, but let's take some of the categories that are specific to work from anywhere and the gig workforce. There is this a huge proliferation around tools trying to solve all the problems with work from anywhere.
mm.
And so I can't keep up with all the tools that people are putting out, and there are some very bad ones, and there's some good ones. And so you're going to see this messy time period where you're going to see a lot of those coming as people trying to figure out what is the best way to do it. The other one that I would talk about is this proliferation of gig platforms. And so there was kind of the first generation of, let's say, Fiverr or Upwork or those
Yeah.
types of platforms. Uh, Now everybody, it seems like, is in the gig platform business, and so eventually, I think you will see if you look at other platform outside of models outside of that and industries outside of that, there's usually a consolidation at some point. We
Yeah.
are not in that phase. We are in the divergence where there are many different platforms as people try to figure this out. The other category is, so if I'm a freelancer, how do I operate my business? There's a whole category of startups that are around that space as
Mm,
well. And then there's what's happened because everybody's working remote. Everybody's using tools, and that tool spits off tons of what I call digital exhaust.
right.
And that ability, all of a sudden you have an x-ray of how your organization operates, and people are just now scratching the surface, and there is a massive amount of startups as people try to figure out how to leverage that data to just to give you an example. There are some AI startups that can actually look at all of the messaging that's going on in the organization, and they can figure out if somebody's being included or not. They can see passive
Really?
aggressive behavior.
Wow.
Um, so there's huge, obviously, ethical implications of
Mm,
that. But what it will make us better, because what in organizations that are starting to leverage this data, it is naturally causing them to flatten the organization structure because people have access to all this information.
yeah.
And so you're going to see organizations change as a result of being able to operate better by having this data.
That's great. And it's interesting where things are going as well, that we're already taking several steps ahead. And, you were talking a little bit before about the revolution that's taking place and the genie that is out of the bottle and it's not going back anytime soon. But what's the barriers that we're seeing to this taking place? Is it something that can be stopped, or will these barriers just fall by the wayside given the inertia and the exponential growth that's taking place?
So I think what'll happen is you'll overcome the barriers. You'll figure out how to work with them, and I'll just give you a few examples. So uh, one of them is, I would kind of say there's going to be a second wave of gig platforms. And
Right.
if you talk to gig workers, there's dissatisfaction with today's platforms. So some of them, if you talk to gig workers, they're like, I want to get off of there as soon as I can. So I develop a client relationship, and then I'm going to work more cohesively. Now, there's certainly different personas of
Yeah.
gig workers. There's ones that we call mercenary, which is they command a high rate and they just, they go quickly from, and then there's others that want a more connection and a deeper relationship with the company they're doing work for.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see that problem solved for, is what I would say. The other one is companies have to learn to work with freelancers, and you have to incorporate them into your business. And
Mm.
it's a completely change for organizations for how they've had to operate in the past, and they're going to have to solve for that. There's other things that what's very interesting is what gig platforms are now are very transactional, by the job, and solving for project based, being able to put together not just one person, one gig employee, but having people solve for an entire project with multiple gig employees. That's still trying to be figured out, as an
Mm.
example. So it's early days. There's a lot going on, but I'm very, there's too much benefit for it. So these problems will be solved.
And this seems to be something that is, the inertia is there already, and it's basically up to organizations, whether it's public or private sector, to be able to adapt and actually get a model whereby they've got a gig or a freelancer strategy, because more and more of their workforce will be demanding to work in this kind of way, Larry.
There's no question, so as a consulting organization, we're a people asset business. And so we have to stay, one step ahead.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. We have some employees that have been long-term employees and are like, I like working for 6 months, but then I want to get in my RV and I want to not work for 3 months.
Yeah.
Can you design a compensation package for me that will let me do that? And so we're trying to update, how we work with gig workers to make it attractive and sticky for them.
So they've got the sort of framework that they're looking for, and give them the benefits, because at the end of the day, I suppose that the market is always going to follow the talent. And if the talent wants more flexibility, wants to have a slightly more sort of tailored approach to themselves as individual centric, then the market and the processes have to change to meet those needs.
That's exactly right. And that's what we're seeing.
So the whole idea of, you work 9 to 6 in for an organization in the same four walls for 20, 30 years, and you get a gold watch. This is completely out of the window.
That is, I couldn't agree more. But what I will say is we are trying, us as an organization is trying to figure out what we call stickiness,
Mm,
because there is huge benefit to having gig workers. You lose something when they leave, some of that knowledge capital. So we want to retain some of that.
mm.
And maybe they work with us, let's say they work with us on a project and a year later they come back and they work on another one. We're trying to solve for that right now ourselves.
Okay, so you have like a portfolio, a roster of talent that you can draw upon when you need it for the specific jobs and roles. So you can draw on the knowledge and expertise.
That's exactly right.
Well, this should be better for the market as well. That organizations don't just sort of keep someone within their little cage in their glass jar, and they're working for one organization. That the skills and knowledge can actually be shared, and you can actually access this talent in a different way. And also, individuals should be able to have the new stimulus of being able to work for different organizations, maybe shorter periods, learn new skills, and actually bring that back to their own bench of capabilities.
Yes, and you started to hit on where I was going to go, which is this whole idea of the skill set of individuals in a company. It's moving
Mm,
so fast and changing so fast that you can't an organization can't train their workforce fast enough to keep up with that, the individual skills. And so you're going to have to use outside workers that are constantly updating their skill sets. There's something called a half-life of a skill,
right.
which is basically how long is that skill valid in the technology marketplace. And that has continued to shrink, and it continues to get smaller. So it leads you to having to use more outside resources and figure out how to do that, because you can't train your organization fast enough to adapt.
Right. So it's actually looking outside, and the things for individuals who are either wanting to go 100% into the freelance lifestyle, or else will be forced to take this as a side gig. what are the things that individuals should be doing to make themselves relevant and future-proof themselves, I guess, Larry, within this?
So the the biggest thing is, which we were talking about before, is this idea of constant learning.
Yeah.
And you have to, it's not, you don't leave university or college anymore, and then you're done. It is constantly training and updating your skill set. And you're you're going to have to be great at that as an individual to maintain relevancy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other, it's changing a little bit with the platforms. But what I would say, what people, if you're in that gig workforce, having a really strong network is
Mm.
really important as well. So you can leverage a platform, but you're probably also going to want to have a professional network that you build equally to those skill sets.
Mm. So that's the way to be able to make sure that you're relevant, but also that you have the value and you can deliver impact to the marketplace and potential employers. So you need to think of that, and it's on your own head to be able to maintain the skills and have the value and the impact that are required for the market of today and tomorrow.
That's exactly right.
Excellent. Well, this is real food for thought and great inputs here, Larry, and we'll be really looking forward to catching up with you later on, because this is fantastic. I appreciate your time and look forward to having you on again soon.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.